Welcome to War Thunder with Subdude. How y'all doing? Well, I just got done watching the European Canadians' little missive on things that have been passed to development. Most specifically, I was interested in the one about the squalls. Now, when you're talking about a squall, that's basically a nautical term for a fast moving weather front. And generally, it implies high winds, heavy rain, and it passes quickly. Uh, when you're out on the ocean, you can actually see these moving across the ocean. Uh, you'll see dark clouds and you'll see the rain coming down out of them, and it'll always be slanted in one direction. And if you happen to pass through one, you're going to get soaked. Been through quite a few of them myself when we're headed out to sea on a submarine. But as far as the visibility goes, this would be a pretty good approximation. And it isn't really that big of a deal if you think about it. Now, you see you've got all these markers out there, and they're great, and you shouldn't get any more than these markers. Why? Because you will know that there's something there. You just won't be able to identify it until you get a lot closer. So even the one that's right there, the Panzer 2C, which is, I'm not exactly sure. Let's do a ranging on it, and we'll get into the gun sight. Zoom that up. It says it's 250 yards away. 250 yards and not being able to see it in a rainstorm like this, yeah, that's about normal. Now, that doesn't mean you can't hit it. It just means that at 250 yards, it's going to be a little hard to hit. Especially if you know what you're doing. And it's been a long time since I actually played with tanks. So, me being able to lob these high explosive anti-tank rounds into somebody really isn't that good. But you can see by looking at through the viewfinder here, the rangefinder, that this is exactly what you should be seeing. You should know there's something out there. But that's about all you should know. Now, you might be throwing HEAT at a mouse, and you're running with something that's got a 37 millimeter cannon. And they just go, you know, it's just like the rain hitting the side of a mouse. Well, that's about what it should be until you get close enough to actually see it. On the converse side, unless they're looking in the direction of your muzzle flash, they're not going to know where that came from. Now, a lot of what he was talking about was dealing with ships on the ocean. Well, that's a completely different story. When you're on the ocean, and a lot of the ships that we're going to have in the game have radar, they're going to know that somebody's out there. Again, they won't know exactly what it is they're looking at, but they'll be able to get a general idea of the shape, maybe this, well, maybe not the shape, but the distance and the direction that the enemy ship is traveling in. They may not be able to identify it. Now, if it's a real small blip, they might go PT boat. If it's a really big one, they might go destroyer or cruiser. So, that's one way of looking at it. But if you're on an older ship that doesn't have radar, you have lookouts. Now, again, these lookouts might be able to say, I see something in the distance, but I can't identify it. And that distance of identification is going to be greatly reduced in a rain squall. But also, with a rain squall, you should have a rise in sea state. If you don't know what sea state is, there's sea states 1 through 6. Sea state 1 is basically calm. Sea state 6 is grab your butt and hang on, because it's going to be a long ride and you're not going to be happy during it. I've been in a few of those. And that's generally during a hurricane or a typhoon. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt and didn't enjoy wearing it. But when you're on land and you've got rain coming down like this, it should be making it a pain in the butt to identify targets and range them. You'll know the direction they are. You'll be able to tell which direction they're moving. You won't be able to tell whether they're moving towards or away from you, but you'll be able to get a general left-right type of motion. Then it's a matter of chasing them down. But again, if they can't see the muzzle flash because of the range and the atmospheric conditions, they aren't going to know where the shot came from unless you're using a tracer round. And let's be honest, not all artillery and tank rounds had tracers in the tail. So, now that I've said that, let's take a look at another sea state or atmospheric condition. And you can see that it isn't exactly the easiest thing to spot targets in. There we go. Now this is I won't say it's the best representation of how it actually looks at sea, but it isn't bad. I've seen it looking a lot worse. And you've got a few white caps, which is good, which means that the weather is showing. You've got a breeze, a good breeze, because you got white caps. So I'd say 10 to 20 knot wind. Now, mind you, I'm awful rusty on this because it's been a long time since I was a lookout. Matter of fact, it's been, I don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 35 years since I was a lookout. I was a young guy back then. I used to love going up to be on the bridge when we were surface. Horrible now that I look back at it, but that's the sort of weather that you're dealing with, which isn't a bad deal. I mean, literally, this is the problem that the players are running into. They want everything handed to them on a silver platter. They want ideal conditions for everything. If you've got ideal conditions, you should be able to do anything. Don't believe it. Don't believe it one little bit. And as for these little archipelagos where you've got all these little bitty islands crammed in there, that's stupid. Warships will hang around on the outside, send in the Army and the Marines to take the island one by one, and then when the boats start trying to scamper away because they can't they can't beat the Marines off, then the Navy picks them off one by one by one by one. But putting capture points in there is absolutely silly. You can't capture ocean. It doesn't work like that. And anyone who tells you differently is blowing smoke up your skirt. And that's the polite way of saying I'm telling you bullshit. But as far as actually the atmospheric conditions, this isn't bad. This looks pretty darn good, in fact. And I liked how the aircraft were immediately targeted, and that's the way I have mine set up. To don't worry about the small stuff. Go after the big targets. You know, let the AAA handle the aircraft. And if nobody else is flying an airplane, then you can worry about shooting at the small craft. This is actually a pretty good representation of what a squall might be, other than the fact that a squall is fast moving. It's a front. It will come in, it will sweep over you, and then it will be gone. Which, if we wanted to implement that into the game, would be a good idea, and it would be a realistic idea. And no, most ships did not run around at flank speed all the time. They run around at about 2/3. And if you don't know why they're doing it at 2/3, it's because at 2/3, you're burning a lot less fuel. Now, some of them would run around at standard. depends upon the captain and their fuel loadout. And you can see here, at a standard bell, this thing can still put on some pretty good turns. It can go quite quickly for a destroyer. And it's pretty agile for a destroyer. So, this is basically a squall type environment. Okay, now in the aviation area, this is a incessant rain issue. This is a you ain't flying type of situation. It's not that you can't fly, it's just that it becomes an instrument type of flight. Because once you lose sight of the ground, you have no reference. It's the same as flying into a cloud, because literally the cloud is on top of you to begin with. This is one of those types of flying conditions where you need to pay attention to your altimeter, your airspeed indicator, and all that good stuff. And if necessary, you need to fly like this so that you can see the horizon and whether you're going up or going down and which direction you're headed. Because if you can't see them, you're dead. Now I'm saying I'm 1,500 feet up, which is quite a ways. Especially in this condition. But I have no reference to the horizon. You can see the problem here. And you can see that you have no visual cues as to where the ground is or what's on the ground. You might be flying directly into the tree. You just can't see it. And you might be flying into the ground and you just can't see it. Now, granted, I was using a bomber, and bombers react horribly. They're slow, they just don't maneuver like fighters. Unless you're flying an A-26, and then again, Gaijin hasn't modeled the A-26 properly yet, even though the game has had the A-26 in the game since, I don't know, 2012? So, and for those of you that don't understand what I'm saying about the A12 or the A26 and 2012, the A26C was put into the game in 2012 as a gift vehicle for people buying a certain laptop in the EU, and it was not released to the rest of the community, and then only to, I guess it was PS2 players or PS4 players, if they bought the certain pack with PS4 when it was first initially launched. And then they gave us the ground attack versions with no bomb sight, which I think was an utter farce. Considering there were like, I don't know, 8 different types of nose that they could put on the front of an A26. But that's Gaijin. They think that they've got this licked because it's a special plane. And boy, that heavy truck just made a lot of noise in my area. But that's the way things go. We're going to get out of here. Well, that pretty much sums up everything I wanted to show you as far as different atmospheric conditions. Now, I realized that the European Canadian was talking about basically FPS, frames per second, and how potato computers, not potato players. Players are people, computers can be potatoes. Can't handle the graphics. Now, I'm really going to take exception to that, and here's the reason why I'm going to take exception to that. My computer, the one I'm currently using, runs at 60 frames a second. It's pretty rock solid. Now, when I was in the ground and looking through the gun sight and running the tank forward, the frames per second would drop down to 52, 48, and then back up to 60 in parts. But that's because of the amount of grass that I was running through my sight scene, which I think is absolutely absurd. But that's the way it is. When I was on the ocean, rock solid, 60 frames a second. When I was in the air, 60 frames a second. Now, you know, first world problem. This is a Dell Optiplex 790. It's got an i5 2400 processor, or 2500 processor, 3.1 gigahertz. It's got a GTX 750 Ti, 2 gigs of RAM, and it's got 16 gigs of RAM with Windows 10, 64-bit. This is a machine that has a service date starting of 2012. What else was started in 2012? Oh yeah, War Thunder. The video card has a service starting date of 2012. Note the things here. War Thunder started in 2012. Granted, it was in development much longer than that, but regardless of that fact, this is a piece of software that runs well on my hardware. If you don't have those specifications, now 4 gigs of RAM, system RAM, 4 gigs of system RAM will be fine. You can run this game no problem, 60 frames a second. If your video card has DDR3 RAM, you can run this game no problem. You'll probably get about 48 to 50 frames a second. And that's on medium graphics. If you can't handle those settings and you have to go to ultra low, it's really time to consider a new machine. I realize there's a bunch of people out there who can't afford new computers. Mine's a refurb. I took a step up from a quad-core Q6600 with 3 gigs of DDR2 RAM and a Radeon 7500 with 2 gigs of DDR3 RAM. This was a massive step forward for me, but it was also a cheap step forward. Now, realize everything I'm going to say is in US dollars. The computer can be bought for less than $200. To get the amount of RAM I have in it would be about another $140. I've got 16 gigs. But buying it refurbed, it comes with 4 gigs, which is pretty good. I put an operating system on here, Windows 10. If you've got Windows 10, load it. If you got Windows 7, load it. If you've got Windows XP, load it. It will run. If you have Linux, guess what? They make a version for Linux. Run it. The video card was a $50 card, and I got it through a website. It was used. It took about 3 weeks for me to get it, but hey, that's because it was coming from China. And you know what? Video cards really don't care. And a GTX 750 Ti does a magnificent job. If you want to see what my video settings are, there we go. That's not bad. Matter of fact, it comes in very well. So if you can get to this level, 16 gigs of RAM is not required. 4 gigs will do fine. And like I said, this is a used machine. It has a 250 gig hard drive out the door, which isn't much, but it's enough. So, total cost into this machine was about $250 if I don't count the RAM. If I count the RAM, I've got about $400 in it. Now, some people are going, well, I can't afford to be spending that much money. Well, okay, you can. But you could probably afford to buy the computer as it sits coming out the door. And then a few months later, buy the video card. I know, first world problems, right? Trying to tell that to a third world country. I'm not telling you you have to. I'm just saying maybe it's time to get a better enjoyment out of what you're doing. Now I realize a lot of people like to take their laptop and run over to their friend's house, connect up and sit down and have a good old time, good old fashioned gaming session with their friend. Great, you go for it. Not a problem. I'm happy for you. But don't be complaining about your potato not working properly on this game because the weather is bad in the match. You don't like it? Bail out and go find another match. Or, as a converse, maybe Gaijin can put it in there that we can select the weather systems that we can actually work with. My system will work well with just about anything. people who have got the newest, latest, and greatest super whammadiniest video card and, the 9900K processor and 32 gigs of RAM and blah, 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 blah. They can probably do just about anything. I mean, they could put it on movie settings and play the game like everyone else. Not everybody is in that league. I understand that. But what happens is you hold back a lot of people, and I'm speaking at Gaijin in this case, by not allowing them to possibly deselect the weather types that their computer is capable of handling. As a matter of fact, during the setup, your system should be checking the systems and saying, okay, well, we recommend that you unselect certain weather patterns for your computer so that you can actually play, which will probably cut down on the number of matches you can actually get into, especially if you're talking naval forces. Nasty weather for naval forces should be a given. And as for ground forces, again, nasty weather should be a given. You should have snowstorms that are really snowstorms. You should have rainstorms that are really rainstorms. On the sea, you should have moving squalls. And that's the way it should be. Now, I don't know if this is a major programming issue for Gaijin, but it would be a good thing. And as for potato computer players, start looking at a refurbed computer. The US market was absolutely flooded with refurbs, and it still is. And if you look around on YouTube, you're going to find how to build a blah 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 gaming computer for blah. I didn't even look at all those on YouTube until after I'd already bought this computer and this video card. And then I saw them and I went, oh, well, I've already got mine and it's working. And I didn't even waste my time getting what they wanted. Now, the only thing I would have done differently is I might have gone for the i7 processor, but the i5 is doing fine. It's quad core, it's at 3.1 gigahertz, it turbos up to 3.4 gigahertz. It's a good system. And the video card does a rock solid job, even though it's only a 750 Ti. Now, that's not to say that I don't want to get like a 950 Ti or a 960 or a 980 Ti. But due to circumstances, this is what I can put in the machine until I replace the power supply. And I'm on a limited budget, so I can't replace the power supply yet. And that would mean it's going to take even longer for me to get the bigger video card. And like I said, everything else inside here, aside from the video card, is stock. Right off the shelf from the manufacturer. So, y'all have a pleasant today, a better tomorrow, and we'll catch you in the air in War Thunder, Air Battles, Realistic. Take care, folks.